The golden retriever wouldn't let anyone touch the shoe. Not the toddler, not the parents. Before we continue, the biggest voice in that house was attached to the smallest dog, the grandmother who drove an hour every Sunday and arrived with treats he'd loved since puppyhood. Cooper would carry it from room to room, place it in the same corner beside the heating vent, and sit in front of it like it contained something the rest of them weren't equipped to see. Laura called it a phase. Her husband Daniel called it puppy brain, his term for the small, inexplicable behaviors that dogs develop and abandon, usually within a week. They laughed about it over dinner while 8-month-old Eli banged a spoon against his high chair tray. Nobody was worried. There was nothing to worry about. Then the laughter stopped, and nobody could explain exactly when or why. Cooper had been there since before Eli existed. Laura had chosen him from a rescue litter when she was 6 weeks pregnant. Daniel had driven 2 hours because she'd fallen in love with a photograph on a website. That was the kind of family they were. Cooper had arrived calm and patient in a way that felt almost unnatural for his breed, and when Eli came home from the hospital, Cooper had sniffed him once, settled beside the bassinet, and never left. Guardian assigned. Position filled. So the shoe was strange from the beginning. It was Daniel's old left running shoe, worn through 3 half marathons, retired to the garage the previous spring. Cooper had retrieved it at some point and made it his. Daniel assumed scent. A comfort object. Dogs did that, but the behavior attached to the shoe was something else entirely. Cooper carried it to the heating vent every time. He would press it against the metal grate with his nose back away, then look at Laura, then look at the shoe. Then back at Laura. She described it to her sister over the phone. He looks like he's trying to explain something to me, and I keep missing the point. Her sister laughed. Laura laughed too. She didn't believe it, but she laughed because the alternative, that he was actually trying to tell her something, hadn't yet become a thought she was willing to finish. Daniel came home late on a Thursday to a house that had the particular quiet of sleeping babies, fragile and held breath. He found Cooper in the living room, not sleeping, not eating, sitting beside the heating vent with the shoe between his front paws. And doing something Daniel had never seen him do in 4 years, he was pressing his nose directly against the vent grate and breathing in, slowly, deliberately. He'd hold his nose to the metal for 3 or 4 seconds, then lift his head and look at Daniel with an expression Daniel couldn't name and couldn't stop seeing afterward. Not scared, he told Laura that night. Not excited. Like, you know how someone looks when they're staying calm because they know something you don't? That's what it was. Laura set down the shirt she'd been folding. She told him he was reading too much into a dog and event. He said he knew. He didn't sleep. The next morning, Eli was in his play corner. Padded mat, foam blocks, soft toys. Cooper was across the room. Not beside him. Not within reach. Just watching from a distance he had never kept before, alternating his gaze between Eli and the vent, with the shoe still between his paws, like an argument he refused to drop. Laura told her neighbor Margaret. Margaret was 68, a retired school principal, a woman who had owned dogs her whole life and treated them with the particular respect of someone who'd learned something from them. She came for coffee and watched Cooper for 10 minutes without speaking. Then she said, "When did you last have the heating system serviced?" Laura thought. 2 years ago, maybe. When they bought the house? Margaret looked at the vent. What kind of heating? Forced air. Gas furnace. Margaret was quiet for a moment, then, call someone. This week. Laura asked if she thought something was wrong with the furnace. Margaret chose her words with care. Dogs smell things we don't, and I think Cooper has been smelling something for 3 weeks. That sentence sat in the room like a stone dropped in still water. Laura looked at Cooper. Cooper looked at the vent. Eli laughed at nothing from his corner, and the sound landed differently than it had a moment before. The HVAC company couldn't come until Tuesday. 4 days. Daniel went to the basement with a flashlight and stared at the furnace. Pipes, metal, the unit that heated his family's home, and understood nothing. Cooper followed him down and sat at the base of the stairs without going further. He watched Daniel the way you watch someone walk into a room you're not allowed to enter. Patient, alert, steady in a way that felt almost unbearable. Tuesday arrived with freezing rain. The technician's name was Roy. He had been servicing residential HVAC systems for 23 years. He went to the basement alone. Laura made tea and held Eli and waited in the particular way you wait when you're trying not to know what you're about to be told. Roy was down there 45 minutes. When he came back up, he washed his hands. Then he turned around, leaned against the counter, and looked at Laura with an expression she would remember for the rest of her life. Your heat exchanger has a crack. A significant one. It's been leaking combustion gases into your ductwork. He paused. Primarily carbon monoxide, low level, which is why your detector never triggered. The levels weren't spiking, they were seeping, slow and steady, right through the vent system. He looked at Eli. At the levels this exchanger was operating, given the age of the crack, the ventilation, the size of the space, in another month, maybe 6 weeks, this would have been a lot worse than a service call. The room was completely silent. Cooper lifted his head, looked at Laura, put his chin back on the shoe. According to the Journal of Veterinary Emergency and Critical Care, dogs exhibit behavioral changes when carbon monoxide levels reach 50 parts per million. Humans typically don't notice symptoms until levels exceed 70 ppm. Standard consumer detectors often don't trigger until 70 ppm sustained. Cooper had been their detector. For 3 weeks, he had been sounding the alarm in the only language available to him. A shoe, a vent, a patient, an increasingly desperate look that said, "Here, it's here. Look here, please." Laura sat down on the kitchen floor on purpose. She needed to be closer to him. She put her arms around his neck and pressed her face into the warm fur at his shoulder and cried the way she'd cried when Eli was born. The kind that comes from understanding at full depth how close something came. Roy came back the second day to finish the job. Before he left, he clicked his toolbox shut and looked at Cooper. Golden retrievers have 220 million scent receptors, he said. Humans have around 5 million. But in 23 years, I've noticed something. It's not just the nose. A lot of dogs notice things. Not all of them stand at the vent for 3 weeks trying to tell you. He picked up his bag. This one's been working that job since day one. That night, after Eli was asleep and Daniel had checked on him twice, Laura sat in the living room with Cooper's head in her lap. She picked up the ruined shoe from its spot beside the now sealed vent, fabric compressed, sole beginning to separate, held together largely by time. She turned it over in her hands. Daniel came in and sat beside her. He looked at the shoe. "We should throw that out." "No," she said. "We're keeping it." He didn't argue. Cooper put his chin on Laura's knee and closed his eyes. Some come with worn blue sneakers dragged to a heating vent morning after morning by something that loved you more reliably than it was ever loved back, and refused, through 3 weeks of being laughed at and dismissed and misread, to stop. If your dog has been trying to show you something and you've been calling it puppy brain, this is the story you needed to hear today. Share it, not for the channel, for the family whose alarm is already sounding in a language they haven't learned to hear yet. And if your pet has ever warned you about something you didn't understand until it was almost too late, tell that story in the comments. Because sometimes the most important thing you can offer isn't advice.